Oh, it's beautiful. Huh.
The human history of the Western Pacific Islands is incredibly dynamic. People have been in New Guinea for at least 50,000 years, and in the Solomon Islands for at least 30,000 years. However, the increased distances between remote oceanic islands prevented further eastward expansion until 3,000 years ago. Lapita culture from 3,300 years ago first appeared in the islands of New Guinea. Within 2 centuries, Lapita groups had spanned several thousands of kilometres to occupy the islands from Reef Santa Cruz all the way out to Samoa. There were many changes with the arrival of Lapita, including the introduction of pottery, pigs, dogs, and the expansion of maritime networks between islands. For most of human history, our species has migrated and lived in continental landscapes. Although the Pacific Ocean spans 1/3 of the Earth's surface, it was only colonised within the last 3,000 years, beginning with the migration of Lapita cultural groups.
We're on board the Imoa Station 60 horsepower dinghy, making a 90-kilometre journey west along the Calvados chain from one end to the other to get to Brooker Island. Just going past Joanette or Panatanane Island. We've got Grass Island up here ahead of us, and we should be at Brooker Island in about 3 or 4 hours.
Having spent longer than expected at Imoa Island, we only had 3 days left to walk around the island and look for any potential evidence for Lapita before we had to get Simon and Vincent back to the airport. Survey always starts sitting down and talking with the landowners before walking across their land. Without the express permission of landowners, this kind of work would simply not be possible. The aim of a survey is to walk around the island and identify places where people may have lived in the past. By looking at areas that likely preserved archaeological evidence, we very quickly narrow down areas of interest and places to investigate further. Gutunka Bay ticked all of those boxes. It was sheltered, had a large beach, and it was high enough so that people could have lived on that coastline even with any changes in sea level over the past 3,000 or 4,000 years.
Kenneth. So lovely.
We decided to start our testing here, in the main village, which besides Gutunka is the only other large sheltered bay on the island. We quickly realised there was limited archaeological potential in this area because the sand had been deposited relatively quickly and probably in the last few centuries had been a swamp. We then turned our attention to Gutunka Bay, which held the most promise for having preserved archaeological deposits going back several millennia. We were in for a challenge though, as the sediments in this area were incredibly compact and make slow progress going down.
We've excavated with crowbar and spades. We've come to a point where the deposit is a bit rocky, there's stones in it. Looks like this is the last next week. And we'll finish off today, but it has been interesting and a surprise.
As we reached our limits and couldn't dig any further without expanding the area, Simon offered some sage advice for next year's excavation season.
You're going to need a ladder next season, mate.
Well, we just found Lapita sherd in the collection that we got from a spade pit today. We were so close to writing off this island entirely in terms of its archaeological potential, but it was only until we gave it a careful clean off tonight, with a cup of coffee in hand, that we found the first dentate stamped sherd. And there we have it.
This morning we leave for Misima, but we've been here on Brooker since Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we've done some great work here and found some very, very interesting finds here. And yeah. Simon, Vincent, video.
Oh, we're on video, are we? Right now. This is awkward. Hi, how you doing? Hi, Mum.
As we left in the dinghy that morning, we were all wondering what we had found. We had found Lapita, but how does that fit with the dynamic human history of the Pacific Islands?
We've spent the day at Gutunka Bay. We've been spade pitting in a couple of different locations up and down this large flat here at the back base of the hill, and we're about 70 metres away from the beach. And what we've done here is just dug a test pit with a spade and the crowbar, because it's quite hard soil, just to see what's underneath, to find the deposits that we found last year, which were Lapita. And what we have here is a much clearer sequence of soil horizons that we can match up with the previous spade pits. And then tomorrow we're going to choose a place where we're going to excavate. So based on this, we've got this dark soil on top, down to about here. In this there's absolutely nothing, it's just overburdened from the steep hill from behind. Below this we've got this sort of yellow mottled clay and some stones in there. And what we started to find here is the odd piece of obsidian, volcanic glass, and the odd piece of very small fragmented pottery. But once you get down to about 90 centimetres, you get a very dark soil horizon down here. And that's where we found our first piece of Lapita pottery. And we're down 1.3 metres at the moment. And there's pottery, fish bone, and lots of charcoal throughout.
After finding a place between the coconut trees to excavate, we got to work stringing up our trench. Under the constant shade of the thick vegetation, we took turns excavating, recording and sieving. It wasn't long before we encountered stone objects that were used by people that once lived in Gutunka Bay. Either with trowel or toothpick, these artifacts were carefully excavated so as not to damage them. To ensure we didn't miss anything, everything was carefully weighed and measured, including how many kgs and litres of sediment were removed from the excavation. One of the best parts about working with the community is that we always had visitors to the site.
what we've done here is open up a 2 metre by 1 metre trench. Where I'm standing here is our systematic excavation, Unit A. Unit B is simply our step down, so we've got room to move inside, but we're also controlling this to some degree. So we're down at 1.2 metres now, but we've just come down onto a surface that's full of charcoal, full of fish bone and full of pottery. And now we're getting into the main settlement phases of Lapita at Gutunka Bay. Earlier this afternoon we came up with this large piece. There's other pieces to it which have more of the rim, but it's got this long neck and a globular shape to it, which will be some kind of water pot presumably. Now these are found in the Port Moresby area, also in a Lapita context, so the fact that it's found out here as well is quite amazing. So over the next 7-8 days we're going to continue the excavations here, and we expect that this pit will go down another 2 metres at least, or 2 metres until we hit the water, but it's probably going to go a bit further, so we'll see how far we get. We don't want to rush things, but there's always next year as well.
Towards the end of the excavation, any large stones coming out of the side of the section were investigated. With the sediment having been exposed to the sun for over a week, it had become hard like concrete and required a chisel and hammer to remove the sediment from around the stone. This rock had some evidence of grinding on it, but had perhaps been used as a seat, as around it were lots of smaller stone artefacts, probably discarded as someone had been sitting there flaking stone tools.
We've been here for just over 2 weeks. The excavation finished yesterday, and today we're just doing the final drawings, plan drawings, stratigraphy drawings, and then we're going to start backfilling and pack up the gear and ready for departure to Misima tomorrow. So we haven't completed the excavations, but we've got down 2 metres. Matthew's down in the pit now, trying to dig out a large rock, which we think is artefactual. Weighing the buckets here, and then all the way down to the beach to be sieved. So the idea of that is that we have a 100% collection of all the cultural material. We can tell the most complete story that we can based on those remains that survive in the ground.
Okay, boys. Say stone pot.
As we fly home after another successful season, we are yet again left to wonder what lies beneath where we finished off our excavation, having to wait another year to get back and find out. But let's fast forward to the next season. As we traverse the tropical waters towards Brooker Island, we are accompanied by several traditional sailing canoes. We are hopeful that this year we'll reach the bottom of the excavation.
We're returning back to the Gutunka site in 2018. We came here and this area was densely vegetated again. It grows really quickly here. So we cleared it all off, found our 2 metre by 1 metre unit, which had been filled back in. And here is Unit A and Unit B. We started taking out the soil, but we encountered water very quickly. And it turns out that the water table had risen by about 2 metres because of the heavy rain at the end of the wet season. It was about 70 centimetres below the surface, and you can see some of the marks on the side of the pit here. So we were battling with that. We decided to string up another 2 metres here, which is Unit C and Unit D where I'm standing here, a bit of section in between. And what we're starting to do now is take this down 40 centimetres just to get the very top of the deposit in high detail. We've taken down this side here down 50 centimetres as a safety bench, because once this water disappears and comes out, we'll be going down to about 3 metres below the surface. So it's best not to have 3 metres of soil looming over top of us. This unit here is going to go all the way down to the bottom, and it's going to act as our sump, so we can drain that out, drag the water out here, and it'll be fighting with the water for the rest of the season. Room there. What the hell is that? Yeah. Hot lid. So we'll just take it out wide and then come towards. Yep. We've got some charcoal in situ if you want it. Yeah. 2204. It's interesting because, I mean, when I first saw it, I just thought it was a body sherd. And as the sediment came away, that's when I saw that there was another piece of pottery behind it. I thought, ah, two pieces of pots. Then it became obvious it was the same piece of pot. But it looks so, it's almost like, it's a T-junction. Oh, this looks like it's becoming loose. Oh, Jesus, it's heavy. Oh, fuck me, look at that. There's beautiful rim sherd. Oh, there's a beautiful kick to it there as well. That's remarkable. That's not like the stuff from Rumour, but the rim forms are. If this was ancestral, you could see why the northern Massey pottery traditions maintained these sort of forms, because their pots even recently are flat rimmed. But Lapita stuff, which is slightly below this, is thin. Thin and flat. That's remarkable.
Vincent here carefully reveals the skeletal remains of fish, the remnants of past meals of the people who once lived here almost 3,000 years ago.
We've dug down this unit here, Unit A, down to 2 metres, so we've reached more or less the level that we were at last year. It's rapidly filling up with water from the rain. And we've stepped down all the way down to here. We're down to 140 centimetres, and we're going to keep taking it down well below this water table to act as a sump, so we can keep this area dry. We can hopefully, water willing, take this down to 2.5 or 3 metres below the surface, at least until we hit the base of the deposit and find out how long people have lived here. We're finding Lapita pottery all the way through here. Up here we're probably looking about late Lapita, about 2,300, 2,500, and down here all the way down to about where Kenneth is standing is middle Lapita, so probably around 2,700, 2,800. Where I'm standing here is just over 3,000 years old, so we've got a lot more to go, and hopefully it'll get older as we go down.
Simon carefully reveals the fragmented remains of a pot, so fragile that the sherds can crumble into dust with the slightest pressure. This reconstructed sherd is a dentate stamp motif typical of Lapita. We were fortunate to be joined each day by the local landowners, who shared our enthusiasm for the human past, with connections to their own ancestors who once lived on this island. Controlling the water level became increasingly challenging. Once we hit the underlying beach sand, the water refilled quickly and required constant drainage. An incredibly tiring process, but spirits were high. Each time we dug deeper, it was a race against the clock to control the water.
So here we are, digging at the Gutunka site. We've been digging here for about a week now, and we've been battling the water all the way through. This is the area that we're excavating over here, Unit A. This is our sump, and we've just completed for the morning excavations down to 2.7 metres. Now, the water table at present still coming up, but it sits at about 1.7 metres, which means that when we're clearing out this with the buckets, we're 1 metre below the water table, and we're into the gravel, we're into the beach sand, finally, after a couple of years of digging. At the bottom, are large pieces of turtle bone that have been cut into shape, and it seems that the people that have been living on the beach before all this sediment built up were using turtle bone to some practical use, making it to tools, of which we don't know what they are at present, but it's at least 3,000 years old. The 3,000-year-old level is where these stones are. These here are all lined up. It seems to be not natural, placed here deliberately. There are a lot of rocks at the bottom here because you've got this initial tumbling event with soil and large rocks coming down the hill. Below that is the beach sand. So what we've recorded is the initial landslide when people came here, cleared the vegetation, probably for gardening, and it's all moving down right on top of the beach sand. We're in it now. Estimations are that the soil is about 3.5 metres deep. We're not going to reach the bottom on this trip, unfortunately, but tomorrow, hopefully, we'll reach about 3 metres and we'll record at least whether it is the earliest phase of Lapita or what we're looking at is people living on this beachfront before Lapita arrived, and then we can trace the development as they arrived and the technology changed and all the way up to after Lapita. So we've got a very long sequence within this profile. Tomorrow we're going to tidy it up. Tuesday we're going to backfill this entire pit, and then Wednesday we're back to Misima. So considering the difficulties of what we're working in, we're getting the evidence that we need. So it's going very, very well.
Once the excavation was finished and we were safely back in Australia, we worked closely with the team at the Kronos Lab at the University of New South Wales and the team at the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation, both in Sydney, to date as many charcoal samples as possible to build up a chronology for the Gutunka site. How quickly did the cultural deposit build up? How long had people lived at that site? Is it a continuous sequence or are there parts missing? These are all questions we were hoping to answer by doing detailed radiocarbon dating. We now know that people were living on Gutunka Beach at least 4,300 years ago. The recovery of a stone blade from the lowest cultural layer provides the first glimpse of what stone technology was like before the arrival of Lapita cultural groups. Around 3,300 years ago, we see the introduction of animals associated with Lapita cultural groups, but this is before the introduction of pottery. The presence of pig, dog and cuscus suggests that Lapita people were in the region at this time and either introduced these animals to the island themselves or they were introduced through trade networks used by the indigenous people living on the island, and is probably associated with the very early arrival of Lapita groups into the region before large-scale Lapita migrations that occurred several centuries later. After 2,800 years ago, we see the rapid build-up of sediment associated with intensive Lapita settlement and the introduction of pottery to the island and to the region. A range of pottery had a range of distinctive dentate stamped designs typical of Lapita in the Papuan Islands. From 2,300 years ago, we see the development of descendant traditions of pottery, and within the last 500 years, the deposition of pottery, a cultural material directly associated with the more recent occupation of Brooker Island, that is remembered in oral histories. From these results, we now know that there was an early distribution of Lapita beyond the Bismarck archipelago, down into the southern Papuan Islands. Here they encountered indigenous populations that have been living here for a long time. The nature of interaction with this population influenced their migration strategies that eventuated in the initial human settlement of the remote oceanic islands. It was only after Lapita people reached the easternmost limits of their expansion that there was a backward migration through the Papuan Islands along the south coast towards Australia. Our excavations at Gutunka have revealed new information about the social processes related to one of the greatest migrations in human history.